Story 1. Film crews typically work 60 to 80 hours or more per week. Call time can be 6 in the morning, and you may not get home until midnight if you are lucky. You are on your feet the entire time on location, away from home, eating in lunch tents with poor tables and chairs. You may not be actively doing anything for long periods, but you must always listen intently and be ready to act at any second. You cannot just sit or lie down and wait. You set up shots in a scramble, then wait for the next order over the radio, which may come in 5 seconds or 5 hours. You never know. The anxiety is intense because if you miss a command or take too long to react, you are in serious trouble. You also cannot speak much or make noise beyond a whisper when filming because sound recording is extremely sensitive and can pick up very faint noises. Setting up can also mean lifting heavy equipment with several people over rugged terrain in pouring rain. Story 2. I used to work as a chef for 14 years, working 50 to 90 hours per week. You do not take care of yourself. It is a slow descent into madness until you literally cannot do it anymore and break. It has been almost exactly 2 years since I left my last position as a chef, and I am still dealing with the fallout in therapy. Obviously, not everyone has the same experience, and working in the food industry does not have to be a bad experience, but it was for me. Story 3. How do you take care of yourself? That's the fun part. I don't. I'm working overtime in an office in the metallurgical industry, trying to repay the huge debt my parents left me. Story 4. I am a surgery resident working 70 to 100 hours a week, sometimes more depending on volume. I am actually working all those hours, whether seeing patients or operating in the operating room. It is difficult to take care of myself, to say the least. Story 5. Honestly, I can't imagine working that much. My cousin works 60 or more hours per week in finance and survives on coffee and takeout. Do people actually have time to shower? Story 6. I won't do it again. 40 is bad enough. If you work 60 hours indoors, it is really bad for you. A doctor told me I needed to take vitamin D tablets. Story 7. Your physical and mental health suffer. But if you are working toward a concrete goal you truly believe in, not just to make more money, your spirit remains intact. If those narrow conditions are not met and you work that much, you will inevitably be broken. It is not a matter of if, but when. Story 8. In the Army, I worked more than 50 hours a week in garrison for more than 10 years. It was more when training in the field or when deployed. As a drill sergeant, I regularly worked more than 80 hours a week. That was very difficult. Story 9. I am not doing it anymore, but I did it for 9 years. I honestly did not know any better. My father was a migrant in Germany and always had 2 jobs. I found work in information technology and learned that the field rewards time spent learning, which leads to higher pay. After 9 years of working 40 to 100 hours per week of active work, I have now found a job where I automated most of my tasks. I spend 5 to 10 hours a week automating new tasks and browse the internet about 20 to 30 hours a week. To be honest, I sometimes miss working 60-hour weeks. Story 10. That is the part a lot of people do not understand. I am basically nonverbal for an hour after I get home. Luckily, my girlfriend understands now, but when we first moved in together, I had to explain that she works an email job and does not talk to anyone all day. I understand that she wants to be social and share her day when I arrive, and I want to hear about it, but I do not have the mental energy to sustain a back-and-forth conversation during that time. And do not get me started on trying to decide what to have for dinner. That is why chefs eat poorly at home. They are mentally, physically, and metaphorically cooked. Story 11. I worked 60 hours or more a week for over 20 years. Not having or not wanting children made it much easier, I imagine. As for taking care of myself, that was still plenty of time to shower, go to the gym, sleep, have a few beers with friends on the weekends, and so on. My ex-wife did all the cooking, so that also helped a lot. Story 12. I work 65 hours a week. 40 hours at a group home and 25 hours providing care for veterans. I am burned out, but this was the way to fix my messy life. I have been doing it for about half a year. The contrast between my improving quality of life and my ability to enjoy it has been frustrating. It is nice to see my credit card balance finally going down, to no longer be behind on rent, and to owe no one money. But I am very tired all the time. Most of my free time is dedicated to my kids and my girlfriend. I do not take care of myself as much as I want to, but I simply do not have any time right now. Story 13. I work in technology operations. I work 60 hours a week and commute weekly from the Pacific Northwest to Southern California. Including travel time, my total is closer to 75 hours, but I never work on the plane. It is soul-crushing, but I am paid a large amount. I keep telling myself I will wait for the next 3 or 6 month incentive, since about 50% of my pay is deferred, and then quit or look for a new job. The last thing I want to do when I am not working or traveling is anything that feels like work. Story 14. I am working between 80 and 100 hours a week as an electrical engineer. I still have time to eat, shower, walk the dog, sleep 5 to 6 hours, and get 30 minutes of exercise each day. I get Sundays off, so I do my chores then. I like the work. It is challenging and interesting, so it is worth it to me. I can retire in 2 years at age 50 if I want. Story 15. Teach. At least 50 hours a week physically present at school, and at least 10 hours per week doing work at home. When I was younger, it was more like 45 hours a week at school and more than 20 hours working at home, but I had to dial it back a bit when I started a family. Am I actually working that amount of time? Fair question. When there is no barrier between personal time and work time, you do not feel bad about goofing off while at work. I have sometimes spent my spare time gaming instead of marking papers because, on paper, I am paid to work 38 hours a week and I reach that by Wednesday. But on the other hand, am I actually doing that much work? When the school board refuses to buy new textbooks because they cost too much and I end up developing my own classroom resources. When the school board takes away all my spare periods because someone resigned in December and they cannot find a replacement teacher. When I am tutoring 10 kids after school every day because they arrived in my classroom 2 grade levels below where they should have been, and I care too much to let that go. During the worst weeks of the school year, report card week, it is just survival. Sometimes new worst weeks appear without warning. Government inspection week, parent-teacher interview week, the week a parent sues the school, or the week a parent attacks your credibility and leaves you sobbing at home for the entire weekend. You are grading exams at home and writing report card comments at home. You go to sleep at midnight or 1 a.m. Because if you go to sleep any later, you will not be functional at 7:45 the next morning when you report to work. Every waking moment is spent on work except for a quick goodnight kiss with your wife and daughter when they go to bed, and the time you spend driving to and from work, bathing, and eating. That is like 80 to 90 hours. You do not take care of yourself. You sit there praying for another job, a transfer to another school where maybe you get lucky and find one of the rare administrators willing to stand up for a fair teacher workload, where you only have to work 50 hours a week instead of 60 plus while being paid for 38 hours. Or you decide to stay and offer yourself up as a burnt sacrifice because you refuse to be the next person to give up on these kids. Story 16. Residency was about 75 to 80 hours a week. I worked, came home, ate and slept. I had maybe some free time on weekends to run errands. I rarely socialized and barely exercised. I was on my feet most of the time at work. By the time I got home, I was so exhausted that the only things I had energy for were eating and showering. It was miserable and I regret going to medical school. Story 17. I work 84 hours a week on the water for months on end, including full 12-hour shifts. I take care of myself by sleeping. Story 18. I used to write code 80 hours a week. You do not take care of yourself much. You endure and reap the rewards later. In my case, it was highly lucrative to keep my career the top priority. After about 10 years of working more than 60 hours per week, I am a top earner in my area. I now work closer to 32 hours per week and have dozens of people doing the coding for me, so work-related stress is now at an all-time low. Story 19. I work 13-hour days, Monday to Friday. I am a self-employed taxi driver and also do food delivery for Just Eat, Uber Eats, and Deliveroo. I get up at 6 in the morning and have a shower. I have packed sandwiches in my car for whenever I am hungry. When I get home at around 8 in the evening, I have a large dinner and am in bed by 9 o'clock. That is my weekday routine and it is my choice to work those hours. Obviously, the more hours I work, the more I earn, so I have become used to that level of income. Story 20. Laughing out loud. I literally work, eat, and sleep for 40 days at 16 hours a day in the oil field. Then I have a month off to enjoy. Story 21. I don't currently, but I have spent many seasons working 60-hour weeks. Often it's due to being in a leadership position and having staffing challenges, so I have to fill in the gaps. Yes, I really worked that much, often forgetting to eat or go to the bathroom until it was critical. There isn't really any self-care at that level. You kind of fall into a rhythm and it becomes easier. Once you stop, you realize, holy shit, there is so much other stuff I need to get done. Story 22. Education and coaching. I do not work the entire time at work. My Reddit posts would prove that. Rum takes care of me. Story 23. Doctor. Yes, it is not that bad every week, and I have weekdays off sometimes, although I also work nights, weekends, and holidays. I use my vacation time liberally. I also like taking care of patients, which helps when I am in the operating room in the middle of the night. I make time to exercise every day, even if that means slogging through a 5 a.m. cycling workout because it makes me feel good, and I feel bad if I do not do it. I have a supportive, amazing husband who splits household tasks evenly. We cook most nights so there is healthy food to eat. We do not have children. When I am at work, I am working from the moment I change into scrubs until the moment I change back out of them. Most importantly, when I am outside the hospital and not on call, I instantly forget I have a job or know anyone who works there. Do not call me. I do not know you. Story 24. I am a paramedic. In a 2-week period when I worked full-time, I regularly worked more than 120 hours. Not every minute is with a patient. Much of it is stocking, attending, driving, staging, cleaning, and offloading, followed by mandatory overtime because there is no relief and calls are pending. Even my time off usually got cut short because I was 6 hours late getting off. The union says we cannot work more than 14 days straight. Yet management complains of short staffing and denies my vacation because no one is available to cover. Last summer, I had about 14 days off for the quarter, many of them partial nights. I have no idea how I did it for so long. 4 hours of sleep in a chair, then the next shift, 2 coffees and a cigarette to get through a 24-hour period. I was a maniac without health insurance who needed to work to feed my family. I am upgrading my certifications, taking 6 university classes and 2 labs, working as a teaching assistant in tutoring, and doing the occasional weekend shift, and I am not nearly as busy. You simply do not take care of yourself. I thought I was okay until I finally had time off and slept for 3 days. After a while, hunger goes away. My body did not hurt then, but now I feel about 80 years old. Do not let work get in the way of taking care of yourself, especially if you have to care for others. It is not manageable, and these unreasonable expectations are a symptom of society. Story 25. 60 is tricky. In a strange way, 80 to 100 is easier because all you do is work and sleep. I get less sleep at 40 to 60 because I overestimate how much free time I have. Business owner in environmental consulting. Story 26. When I worked in a quality control laboratory, I was working the whole time and often skipped breaks. Samples had to be prepared, instruments set up, prepared samples loaded onto instruments, and instrument software required my input. Data had to be collected, processed, and reported. Reported data and notebook entries required corrections, and controlled materials required chain of custody documentation. It was a large operation with high-volume production, and there was always more to do. At work, I drank coffee and water. At home, I drank beer and liquor and did not prepare healthy foods. The only reason I stayed somewhat fit was that I rarely sat down at work and I was active on weekends. It was not healthy. Story 27. I was working 60 to 70 hours a week and traveling for work every 2 weeks, and I had 0 time for myself. The only thing I could make time for was soccer, since that was one of the few activities that let me forget how much was going on. My sleep suffered. One time, a client canceled a project, which gave me a light week that I took off. I slept all day. I also started having heart palpitations. That was my cue to begin aggressively applying for a new job. Took me 6 months to leave that place. The month before I left, I was living out of my suitcase because I had gone to Philadelphia, Nashville, and Portland in just 4 weeks. I never want to work this much again. It is not worth it. Story 28. I used to work in cyber incident response, and it was terrible for my health. The overtime made it feel worth it, but I am much happier in my new role with regular hours and better pay. No job is worth your sanity. Story 29. Project management and building information modeling. No children. Exercise every day. Plan to travel for 5 years. Then take it easy. Story 30. I have an office job during the week and do Amazon Flex on the weekends. I do not take care of myself because this country only values me as someone who can make someone else more money. Story 31. I am a piping designer, working 40 hours a week as a salaried employee. I am also a licensed tradesman and put in about 20 to 30 hours a week on a side job, 4 hours after work 3 nights a week and 8 to 14 hours on the weekend. It is a slog, but my wife is an amazing mother. So I am happy to do what I need to so she can be with our children while they are young. Sometimes I am not even upset to get home at 10 in the evening on a Wednesday because I am glad things are taken care of. Today I am dreading driving to my side job after work, which is why I am online. Story 32. As an English teacher, I worked 60 to 70 hours a week, from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. at school and then grading and planning most evenings and weekends. There were virtually no days off from September through June. I loved my students, but the workload nearly killed me. I have been retired for 10 years, and I still have school anxiety dreams. Story 33. I am a special education teacher. It is not every week, but I can work up to 60 hours on a heavy paperwork and meeting week. Teachers, in general, work more than 8 hours a day with grading and lesson planning, and in special education we have mountains of legal paperwork and meetings on top of that. I only have 17 students at the moment. I refuse to do any work on Saturdays, and my husband takes care of the children in the evenings when I am lesson planning. Story 34. I work in consulting. Much of the past 6 months has been in the 60 hours per week range because I joined a challenging program on an aggressive schedule. I am married with 4 children. While I have adjusted for the most part to the hours, it is easier to maintain that schedule when I am traveling to the client site versus working from home. Adherence to my gym routine has ebbed and flowed. I have postponed some medical care that I am now scrambling to address before the end of the year to reach my insurance out-of-pocket maximum. There is usually at least 1 day a week that is a 7:30 a.m. to midnight day, and 3 to 4 hours a day or more on the weekends. I took a week off for a family vacation in July and felt the impact on my schedule for more than a month afterward. Throughout my career, I have tried to avoid these scenarios as much as possible, but it comes with the territory. I am senior enough now that if I am involved from the start or in the sales phase, I have been good at planning and projecting to avoid this kind of crunch. For the current engagement, I was pulled in late to help. This was more common earlier in my career. The worst was about 20 years ago. I went 6 months without leaving the office before midnight, and 3 to 4 months when I never left before 2:30 a.m. For that project, the hotel was directly across the street from the airport, which was directly across from the client office. I would go the whole week and never leave that little triangle. Some nights I would stumble back to the hotel at 4 a.m., crash for a few hours, then be back by 8 a.m. Story 35. Sort of. I am a night owl working in a morning lark world. I am required to be in the office by 8 to 9 in the morning, but my brain does not kick in until closer to noon. In the morning, I drink coffee and putter around doing routine, low-cognitive work. I get far more done from 5:30 in the afternoon, by which time almost everyone is gone, until about 8 in the evening, depending on workload, than I do during the rest of the day. I take care of myself with regular doctor visits and blood work. I have some thyroid issues that are monitored every 3 months with blood tests, so I try to stay on top of that. Story 36. I work roughly 60 hours a week on an ambulance. I compress my work into 12 to 24-hour shifts to give myself a few free days. I come home at about 11 p.m. each night, take an hour or two to finish chores and cooking, and help my older parents. I do not like going out that much, so on my days off I stay home and relax. I have always struggled with depression. Now I am depressed, but I have a paycheck. Story 37. I previously worked as a director at a startup company. I was one of 3 founders. We had very little money to start with, and at that time I was in medical school because of family pressure. We took every job that came, even if the pay was low or the job was beyond our reach. As the only person who knew the technical work, I did most of the heavy lifting. I was also in medical school, which was challenging on its own. Often I had classes from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., followed by client meetings or shoots until midnight. Weekends were always for filming commercials or other projects. My second partner handled the business side. Looking back, I hardly remember the details. It was a constant rush. I did that for 2 years and remember little good. Difficult clients, excessive flattery, and unrealistic deadlines. One day, on the 5th consecutive day of working 16-hour days during a holiday while on a rooftop for a project, it hit me. I was paying with my life for something I was no longer sure was worth it. I did not know what I was missing until I quit. Now I live a balanced life as a doctor. I'm happily married, have many great friends and memories, and still spend time with my family. The company is still going strong, which makes me happy. My partners are thriving. I learned that my time is valued by the memories I make, not just by the work I do. In short, working more than 60 hours a week leaves you with little else but work to remember. Meals become whatever is fastest and available. There is no time for friends or yourself. You lose parts of yourself, and when the work ends you are left to pick up the pieces. Story 38. I no longer do it, but when I did I worked in restaurants and bars as a bartender. I typically worked 70-hour weeks. Aside from brief chit-chat with coworkers, I was working the whole time. I did not take care of myself. I was a wreck. My life was filled with alcoholism, drugs, and lack of sleep. While these problems were not entirely due to my job, the odd and inconsistent hours kept me in a perpetual state of depression and exhaustion, which I usually self-treated with alcohol and drugs. Once I left that industry and moved to a job with more regular daytime hours and fewer hours overall, I felt much better. Story 39. I work in the medical field. On paper, I work 60 hours or more, but much of that time is spent driving between cases or waiting. Thankfully, my days start early, so I still see my children at night. Once they go to bed, I take my dog for a walk of 1 to 2 hours every night, and that is about the extent of my self-care. Story 40. 60 hours is relatively easy. I work in finance. It is just a long work day, but it fits within Monday to Friday. 12 hours working, 8 sleeping, and 4 hours for other things is not too challenging. 80 hours a week starts to wear me down because it means no weekend. Realistically, you still get a full night of sleep and can spend an hour or 2 a day with your spouse and kids. At over 80 hours a week, life for me becomes quite miserable because it is just work and not enough sleep. It is okay for a week or 2, but I will not do it for longer. It is all about perspective. I find it odd when people say it is impossible to eat, exercise, or maintain relationships with the time left after working 60 hours, but I have about 15 years of practice. Story 41. Anyone can work 60 hours in a week without suffering adverse consequences if they are working the right job for the right reasons. If you choose your line of work or your current job solely for the paycheck, it will have to be a substantial paycheck to keep you going 60+ hours a week without burnout. If you are doing something you love or something you find deeply meaningful, you do not measure your days in hours worked. You measure your days by what you accomplished and what you did not. Most people who work long hours just for the paycheck will burn out. They become the doctors who misdiagnose illnesses because they cannot be bothered to investigate properly. They become the police officers who behave poorly at traffic stops because they are so tired of listening to adults complain. Or they become managers and business owners who adopt shady or even outright illegal practices in the name of chasing money. You cannot build much of a life for yourself on 40 hours a week, but simply increasing time on something you do not enjoy is not a long-term solution. I have gone through periods when I was self-employed and worked only 20 hours a week because I hated what I was doing, and I have worked 16-hour days that felt like 4 hours because I was engrossed in the work. How many hours you work is only one part of the self-care equation. If you rest properly, exercise, eat cleanly, and pursue clear goals you are excited about, 60 hours is nothing. If you hate what you do for a living, 6 hours is too many. Story 42. Responding for my spouse. He is a truck driver. He averages 60 hours per week. Yes, he is working that entire time. He only manages his personal hygiene and exercise routine. I take care of everything else: housework, grocery shopping, cooking, yard work, and car repairs. Story 43. That applies to both my husband and me. We work in finance but in different areas. We are not working the entire 12 hours we are logged on each day. We have not taken good care of ourselves. We spent our mid-20s until now climbing the corporate ladder, and we are now committed to making time for our health, social lives, and family. We just had a baby. Story 44. I cannot go into a lot of detail, but it is similar to what Jennifer Lopez did in The Cell. I actually work long hours, though I do not really feel it is work in the same way as other jobs. It is more like a personal interest and passion, so I am always doing something that leads to paid work. I have not taken care of myself well in many years. I do like to make vegetable stews. Another way I take care of myself is by saving money. Story 45. I work 60 hours per week as an arborist, outdoors year-round. It is exhausting physically and mentally because I often travel to other cities and am away from home and loved ones, entirely alone. I have been doing this for about a year and am only willing to continue at this pace for one more year at most. I cannot take care of myself under these conditions, and I can feel the effects on my physical and mental health. Story 46. I quit that job, but I had worked there for about 5 years. I was a payroll specialist for a construction company that ran a weekly payroll instead of a bi-weekly payroll. Most of my day I spent at my desk wasting time online until the people who submitted reports had to go home and would send them an hour before leaving, because if they sent them earlier someone might think they had free time and give them more work. 10-hour days were normal, 12-hour days were common at least once a week, and I had worked several 14 to 16-hour days. Since I was paid hourly, I earned about as much as if I had 2 jobs, which was kind of nice. But the long hours at my age, combined with a long commute, were brutal. My wife asked what good it was to make money if I was working myself to an early grave. I took a salaried position with a slightly higher base pay but much less overall since there is no overtime. I now work a straight 8-hour day and go home every night. I work for a nonprofit art museum, and it gives me a sense of pride to work for an organization I feel is vital not only to my local community but to the whole world. It's been a long time since I felt this way about a job, and it's really nice. Story 47. I do all my overtime during the week and keep the weekends for myself and the side business my wife and I run. I take about 5 weeks of vacation a year. Honestly, you get used to it. When I occasionally go home after a regular day, it just feels like I left at lunch. Story 48. I work an average of 55 hours a week. Sometimes it goes up to 70, and other weeks it is 40. I try to stick as best I can to a routine or schedule. I work out before work early in the morning to ensure it gets done. I catch up on housework, laundry, and other chores on my slow weeks and get through the busy weeks. Story 49. I work 60 hours a week, sometimes more, in a low-stress office environment. I have a lot of freedom to come and go as long as my work gets done, so my office is like my second bedroom. The owners are very relaxed and do not care how much overtime we work because they make a lot of money. I can watch movies, pay bills, shop online, or even play on my Steam Deck. When I'm not in the office, I'm almost always at the gym. I'm usually only at home to sleep and shower, so it works out for me, and I make great money. Story 50. I have a full-time job Monday through Friday and a second job on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday evenings and for 8 hours on Saturday. On those weekdays, I do not get home until after 10 o'clock in the evening. Altogether, I work 62 to 65 hours a week. I work from home on Mondays and Tuesdays for my full-time job and use that time to clean, do laundry, go grocery shopping, prepare food, and handle similar tasks. It is hard to take care of yourself because you are always tired, But once you adjust to the schedule, you learn to manage the time you have and become more efficient. Prioritize what is important to you and find a balance to stay physically and mentally healthy. People's circumstances vary, but do your best to get good sleep. Story 51. I work in film. I work long hours, and it is actually really hard to take care of myself while I am working on a show. I do my best, but I usually gain weight and develop body pain partway through the show. I am lucky that sometimes I can see a physiotherapist, acupuncturist, or chiropractor on the weekends. When I finish a show, I can take a month or two off before starting a new project, and I use that time to take care of myself. Story 52. I am a research engineer and research scientist. My timesheet allows only 40 hours per week, but between late nights and weekends, I usually work 50 to 70 hours. About half my time is spent trying to understand why something does not work or how to make it work, and the other half is spent on mathematics, code development and testing, structural design, and writing. Both parts require the same focus and energy. I put in the hours because I love what I do and genuinely believe it is as close to science fiction as I will get in my lifetime. I do not need a lot of additional self-care because I am not particularly stressed. I exercise regularly, eat a reasonably healthy diet, and get at least 7 hours of sleep every day. I learned those habits in graduate school when I was unbelievably stressed daily. I am extremely selective about the people I let into my life. Short of severe health problems, nothing drags a person down like association or communication with the wrong people. If you feel you are consistently falling short of your potential, try changing the roster of people in your life. Story 53. I did it for a couple of months. The work was backloaded each week, which meant an early morning finish every Friday. A stressful Monday when the Friday consolidated report was issued, and then starting all over again. It was not worth it. A senior project manager I was working with offered me a brilliant opportunity, but I needed sign-off from my department. They did not grant it, saying they could not afford to lose me from the team, so I left. Story 54. I work in entertainment. Scheduling and planning are crucial. If I can set and follow a routine most days, I can plan meals, get exercise, and make time for friends and family. On my downtime, when I don't have work, I have to keep moving, though I am less stressed. During periods of unemployment, it's easy to relax and fall out of routines. Is it easy? No. Do I often neglect my self-care and parts of my life? Yes. Is it frustrating to be around? Yes. I disappoint people regularly simply by trying to pay my bills. But quite frankly, what job pays enough to allow you to work 20 hours a week, provide fulfillment, ensure financial security, accomplish tasks in a timely manner, and offer the flexibility to take care of life? Unless we all magically get jobs that are that lax, I'll be working. Story 55. I used to, but I don't anymore. At one point, I had to buy another bed so my wife could sleep because I was getting calls through the night. I don't miss that at all. I worked almost nonstop, dispatching trucks carrying hydrochloric acid to well sites as a branch operations supervisor. There was no care taken. Story 56. The petroleum business is evil. It depends what you mean by taking care of yourself. I get housework, meals, dishes, laundry, shopping, and whatever else done before bed or on weekends. Story 57. I worked 100 or more hours a week as a surgical resident. Now I probably work 60 to 70 hours a week. My routine is mostly regimented. I have everything planned out in advance, including meals. I get up early to work out, try to arrive at the same time every day, and work until I am caught up. I normally come home, reheat my food, shower, and take care of my pets. Then I repeat the cycle. The days go quickly, but I find the hardest moments are when I have time to sit and think about things. It gets lonely, and sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice. Story 58. Sometimes I work 60 hours per week. I am a nurse. I split my time between clinic work and bedside care. I do it for the extra money. I feel dead inside most weeks. I am hoping to win the lottery. Story 59. My husband lives on his towboat for 6 months each year, working 21 days at a time, 12 hours a day. When he gets home, he collapses for the first 72 hours while his body recovers, but the job also gives him 6 months off to do what he wants. We have many adventures with our children. Story 60. In car sales, a good week is 50 hours, but more often it is 60. I had 3 days off last week and still worked over 40 hours. I get paid an average of $400 per car. I barely have any time to spend with my wife and our dogs, which is depressing. I would appreciate advice on how to move into another career. Story 61. 90 hours a week, and you basically just exist. You wake up at 5 in the morning, go to work, come home, eat quickly, and go to bed. Showering is often optional or skipped in favor of eating. At night you are exhausted, and in the morning you are back for another round. By the end of the third month, after a half day or maybe a full day off, you are happy to get 10 days off. Then you are back for another 3 months of work. In addition to working every day, you are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You must respond to any call and you will receive calls. Short answer: you do not take care of yourself. Story 62. I have worked many weeks of more than 60 hours as a doctor. The truth is you do not take care of yourself working like that, and eventually you burn out. I do not mind working hard, but I am not willing to return to that lifestyle. Story 63. Not me, but my husband. His in-office time is probably 55 hours a week, from 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, plus 2 to 3 work dinners each week, which puts him over 60 hours. On weeks when he travels, which is about 40 to 60% of the time depending on the time of year, you can add another 10 to 15 hours because he often travels on weekends, attends client breakfasts, and always goes to work dinners. He is a corporate insurance executive. This is not health insurance. Despite his intense schedule, he gets up at 3:30 or 4 a.m. every day to work out and crashes hard on the weekends, prioritizing sleep and rest, although he regularly has weekend meetings and works an additional 4 to 6 hours. On top of all this, his job requires him to be on pretty much at all times, so the mental exhaustion is intense. He works a lot with the mergers and acquisitions team, and those deals come together quickly, so travel is often on short notice with intense deadlines. I keep him well fed at home, and he is very healthy besides the chronic lack of sleep. We go to bed early. I would be lying if I said it did not take a toll on our relationship. But I admire his ambition, and he truly loves the work. We make it work. We both know it is not forever. They are growing a business right now, and he is working toward achieving some personal goals. But it remains to be seen how long this is sustainable. Story 64. I am currently working 3 freelance jobs and putting in very long hours. I am dealing with burnout and often find myself doom-scrolling my phone with almost no memory of what I have seen or read. I am not taking care of myself, and it is hurting my relationships. My hope is that one of the freelance gigs will start to pay more so I can drop the worst one and regain control. Story 65. I used to work a pretty demanding job for about 6 years. Overtime was kind of mandatory. 6 to 7 day work weeks were pretty normal with 12-hour shifts. I went through a few months where I worked 30 days straight with no days off. My paychecks usually covered 140 to 160 hours bi-weekly. I took care of chores myself daily. I did 1 load of laundry a day and spread it throughout the week. I ate more fast food than I care to admit, and I like that some restaurants serve dinner at 7 a.m. On my days off I usually slept, to be honest. I missed out on a lot of events with family and friends, but I am glad I can attend now. I do not regret anything, but I never want to work like that again. Story 66. I am a teacher and a coach. During the peak of the track season, I work nearly 60 hours a week because of track meets. It is exhausting, but I mostly enjoy it. I certainly cannot do it forever, but it has been fun and rewarding. Story 67. I had 2 full-time jobs for about 2 years and worked about 80 to 90 hours a week. Teaching and bartending, plus some catering gigs. I worked almost constantly and did not take care of myself well. I would wake up at 5:45 a.m., work until 3 p.m., sleep until 5:30 p.m., eat and then work from 7 p.m. to midnight or 2 a.m. I would go home, sleep, and repeat. I was young and had energy. I no longer have that kind of energy. Story 68. I am old now, But during my career, it was not uncommon to work from 3 a.m. to 4 p.m., 7 or 8 days in a row, and to be subpoenaed to appear in court while I was sleeping. Police work is not for people who need a lot of rest. That is why most courthouses have small quiet rooms where police officers can sleep while waiting to be called as witnesses. Story 69. I work 60-hour weeks for 3.5 months each year as a tax accountant. The hours are long and I work Saturdays. I am paid hourly, so I receive time and a half for overtime. During tax season, I am about 90% billable because there is a lot of churn. I still get good sleep and time with my family at night. I prefer to arrive at the office around 6 a.m. and work until 5 p.m. with a half-hour lunch during the week. Saturdays are usually a short day to make up the time. For dinner, I am the main cook in the family. Frozen soup is amazing. I can take it out the night before and heat it in a pan the next day. Story 70. I usually work 60 hours a week as a welder, and I am breaking my back for most of that time. I go home, smoke a bowl, drink a beer, and fall asleep. That is probably not the best thing to do, but neither is working that many hours. Story 71. Doctor. I usually work at full throttle 90% of the time. Eat, sleep, work. Story 72. I just finished 5 years running a guest house. It was seasonal, so I worked full-time only from April to October, but during the season I worked 14 hours a day, 7 days a week. On a really lucky day, I would get about 1 to 2 hours during the day to myself. On a bad day, it could be as little as 15 minutes. I took care of myself by getting outside for a run when I could, eating well, and drinking plenty of water. I found joy in simple things like listening to the birds. Regardless of what you do, working more than 60 hours a week is only sustainable for a while, and a lot of life will pass you by. Story 73. I used to work up to 70 hours per week when my children were young because I became a single mother and was not receiving child support. Caring for my children was my highest priority. I did not get new glasses for about 10 years, but I always had my hair done. Despite premature gray hair, I have always kept it blonde. Story 74. How do you take care of yourself? The only thing you can do is try to sleep whenever you are able to. Story 75. As someone whose family member works 14-hour days, I have a family to support. You have to do what you have to do, you just get used to it. When you need to earn a living, you just do it. When asked whether they have ever considered working fewer hours, what would I do with all that free time? I need the money. Also, poor decisions that lead to inadequate support, becoming the only person working, and getting sick because working so much weakens the immune system. Story 76. I am a merchant, among other things. I sleep well, even if only 5 to 6 hours on average. I eat as healthfully as possible. I sometimes practice a little yoga and do Pilates. Story 77. I work 10 to 12-hour days and Saturdays as well, but only 8 months of the year. I am an irrigation technician and only get paid for billed labor. Shop time, drive time, and parts runs are not paid. I try to maximize my time by keeping everything I need on the truck and working as efficiently as possible. Out of a 12-hour day, I work 9 to 10 hours of billed labor. Then I play disc golf until it is dark every day. Story 78. Not working there anymore. One of my colleagues passed away, and another quit in the same week. I was the only one who could do their jobs. My boss promised to hire more personnel to help, which I knew was an empty promise. I worked after hours, on weekends, and on national holidays. I did that for 2 more years, and then one day they let me go along with more than 100 people. Last I heard, they had let go 500 personnel, and more than 75 are going to be fired soon. Story 79. I am trying to get into a manager position. I do not do it every week. I do it once in a while. I went from 230 pounds, a mix of muscle and fat, to 275 pounds of mostly fat. Story 80. I work full-time, 40 hours per week, and 20 hours per week part-time at another job. I try to. Story 81. In the weeks I work a minimum of 70 hours and a maximum of 112 hours. The trade-off is that when I am off, I am completely off. I am a helicopter mechanic who works 2 to 3 weeks at a time, followed by a couple of weeks off. I do not take care of myself. Story 82. I was a domestic violence and sexual assault emergency responder. It was constant. I gained weight and suffered depression quietly. I worked constantly on hotlines and web chat, handled walk-ins, housing, police standby for item pickup, court date advocacy, board meetings, and police station advocacy. It was easily a 60-hour week. Paperwork alone for a single client is about 4 hours long. I had 86 cases when I quit. I closed them out appropriately and handed them off with services. I cried all the time on my way home because you can't show those emotions in the moment on the job. You have to be the reliable person for a client. I even ran the multidisciplinary team for part of my state. It was hard. I left and haven't looked back. Story 83. I am allowed as much overtime as I want, so I usually stay late even though I rarely do anything important. Story 84. I used to work 80-hour work weeks. I was senior director of operations for the pharmaceutical industry. Yes, I worked those hours, and no, I did not take care of myself. Story 85. I work full-time at a mechanic repair shop and part-time at O'Reilly Auto Parts. My self-care calendar is very scheduled. I rely on many alarms to find time for necessary chores. I also use time at my jobs to get things done. I keep a small crock pot I found at a thrift store at my first job and pre-make my dinners on Sunday evening. I cook them in the crock pot at my first job and eat them on the way to or at my second job. I also keep groceries at my first job. Finding time to eat is important because if I don't, I sleep poorly and sometimes sleepwalk and eat. I found that I'm good on 6 to 7 hours of sleep. When I wake up, that is my time to take care of my kids' things and the animals. It's hard, but it's just a moment. Moments don't last forever. I plan to ask for a raise at my first job. I work hard and they see it, but I just started and want to give it 6 months of hard work before asking. Story 86. There was a period in my life when I worked in finance and at a restaurant at the same time. I would leave the house at 7 a.m. to get to the office at 8 a.m., then leave at 3 p.m. to take the subway to the restaurant. I managed a 15-minute nap on the subway and got home around 1 a.m., sometimes earlier, sometimes later. I usually worked 1 or 2 restaurant shifts on the weekend. Those weeks were often 80 to 100 hours. After about 8 months of that, I quit the finance job and took on more responsibility at the restaurant, which was about 60 to 75 hours per week. After a couple of years, I became burned out and severely depressed. My serious relationship ended because of all this and I lost my job. I experienced a lot of suicidal ideation and came very close to losing my life. In short, it is not worth it. Story 87. I work 80 to 110 hours per week. I am a physician. I try to exercise every single day to take care of myself. I try to eat home-cooked meals and a serving of greens daily. I would say I am working 85% of those stated hours. Story 88. I work a full-time job and a part-time job, averaging a total of 60 hours. I do it because living in the area I'm in is expensive, bills add up, and I have a bit of debt to pay off. With my second job, I'm able to add money to savings and do things I enjoy without worrying about breaking the bank too much. Story 89. I worked the night shift at a Japanese factory, doing 2 hours of overtime every day, then attended Japanese classes from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. and worked at a love hotel on weekends from 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. That was about 80 to 85 hours a week, not including commute or lunch. I went from 75 kilograms to 59 kilograms over 5 months. It was a sad period in my life. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.